Darian Zayne yanked off his tie the second he stepped into the hallway, the sound of clinking champagne glasses and camera shutters still echoing behind him. He ducked into the service elevator, ignoring the assistant calling his name from the ballroom. God, he hated these press events. Flashing fake smiles while investors toasted to his latest tech acquisition, pretending like he didn't want to set the entire room on fire just to get out of it. He pressed the ground floor button and exhaled, finally alone. He needed air, real air. And maybe a moment where no one asked him about stocks, shares, or strategy. The elevator doors opened onto the quiet loading dock behind the hotel. He slipped through the exit, walking fast, his polished shoes hitting pavement instead of red carpet. The city buzzed around him, honking taxis, distant sirens, people laughing as they spilled out of restaurants. He kept walking until the golden glow of the hotel faded behind him. He turned a corner and stopped. There, sitting on a concrete step outside a tiny bookstore with a flickering neon "Open Late" sign, was a woman. She was eating fries out of a paper bag, legs crossed, a beat-up leather journal open in her lap. She looked up. "You lost?" she asked, brushing a fry crumb from her jeans. Darian hesitated, then shrugged. "Kind of escaped, actually." She raised her brows. "Escaped?" "Black tie event, too many cameras, too much champagne, not enough oxygen." She laughed, really laughed, like she didn't care who he was or what he was running from. "Well, lucky you. You've arrived at the only bookstore in Manhattan that sells fries after 10 p.m. He smiled, really smiled for the first time in days. "Is that on the sign?" "No," she said, offering him a fry, "but it should be." He took one, sat down beside her. "I'm Darian." "Vera," she said. "Vera Hart." They sat in silence for a moment. The city buzzed on, but here on the bookstore steps, it felt like time slowed. "What are you writing?" Darian asked, nodding at her journal. "Terrible poetry I'll never show anyone," she said, closing it quickly. "It's just something I do when I can't sleep." "You come here often?" "Every night," she said. "I close up. My sister owns the place, but I run it." He looked at the storefront. It was small, a little crooked, but warm. There were fairy lights in the windows and handwritten signs taped to the glass. "I like it," he said. Vera tilted her head, studying him. "You don't look like the kind of guy who ends up in places like this." "And what kind of guy is that? The kind who owns polished shoes, wears cufflinks, and smells like a $400 cologne?" He chuckled. "You're not wrong," she grinned. "So, Darian, what are you really running from?" He looked at her, at the way her eyes didn't flinch, at how she wasn't trying to impress him or pitch him anything. She just asked, and for some reason he answered. "Noise," he said simply. "Everyone wants something, everyone's watching. I just wanted a little quiet tonight." Vera nodded, then stood and stretched. "Well, you found it, but quiet doesn't last forever." He stood too. "Can I walk you home?" She paused. "You don't even know where I live." He shrugged. "That's what walking you home is for." She looked him up and down, like she was trying to figure out whether he was a lunatic or just had really good hair. "All right, cufflinks," she said finally. "But only because you seem like the kind of guy who doesn't know how to cross a street without a driver." She was right. He almost stepped into traffic at the first light. They walked for 20 minutes, talked about nothing and everything. She told him about quitting a corporate job 2 years ago to help her sister keep the bookstore alive. He told her, carefully edited, that he worked in tech. He didn't mention the Forbes cover or the fact that his company had just been valued at $500 million. She didn't ask. She didn't care, and that was the most peaceful thing he'd felt in months. They stopped outside a narrow brownstone. "Well," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear, "thanks for the walk. Thanks for the fries." She smiled. "You're welcome." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "That depends," she said, arms crossed. "Will you be escaping another black tie event?" "Maybe." She bit her lip, and something in her eyes softened. "Come by the store tomorrow, around 7, we close at 8. "I'll be there," she nodded. "Good night, Darian." "Good night, Vera." He turned and walked away, heart hammering harder than it had after any press conference, any business deal. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about numbers or headlines. He was thinking about a girl on a bookstore step, eating fries and writing terrible poetry. and how he already couldn't wait to see her again. The next night, Darian stood outside the bookstore, his coat collar turned up against the early spring wind. The lights inside glowed softly, casting golden rectangles onto the sidewalk. He hesitated before opening the door, not because he was nervous, he didn't do nervous, but because something about this place made him feel like he was stepping into someone else's life. A quieter, messier, more honest one. A bell chimed above him as he stepped inside. Vera stood behind the counter, balancing a stack of paperbacks in one arm while reaching for a mug with the other. She looked up, her expression unreadable for a split second before it settled into something almost amused. "You actually came," she said, setting the books down with a soft thud. "You sound surprised. I didn't think you were the type to follow through." "And what type is that?" She took a sip from her mug. "The kind who disappears back into a black car and forgets people who sell used books for a living." He ran his finger along the edge of a display table. "I don't have a black car." She leaned an elbow on the counter. "No, then how did you get here?" "I walked." She blinked. "From where?" He shrugged. "Midtown." Vera let out a low whistle. "That's at least 40 blocks. I needed the air." She studied him like she was trying to fit a stranger's face to a familiar story. "You're weird," she said finally. "And yet you invited me." "I was curious." He glanced around. "This place always this quiet? Fridays are slow," she said. "Everyone's out somewhere cooler. I like it." She raised a brow. "Do you?" He looked at the crooked shelves, the mismatched chairs in the corner reading nook, the faded rug curling at the edges. "Feels like it belongs to someone who cares." Vera ran a fingertip along the worn counter. "My sister does. She built it from nothing. And you?" "I keep it from falling apart." He nodded slowly. "Must be a lot to hold together." "That's life, isn't it?" she said. "Keeping things from collapsing." He studied her face. There was a flicker of something beneath the surface, not sadness exactly, but a kind of tired resilience. "You ever wish you'd done something else?" "All the time," she said. "But then someone comes in asking if we have a copy of a book their grandmother read to them as a kid, and I remember why I stayed." Darian walked toward a shelf and pulled out a hardcover with a cracked spine. "This one any good?" "Only if you like stories about cursed violinists and secret passageways." "I do," he said, and she laughed. "You don't even know what it's about." "I trust your taste." Vera walked around the counter and took the book from him. "Then I'll lend it to you. But only if you promise to return it." "I always keep my promises." She handed it over. "That's what they all say." As he took the book, their fingers brushed. It wasn't dramatic or electric, but it lingered. Neither of them pulled away right away. Vera cleared her throat. "We close in 20 minutes. I'll help you lock up." She hesitated. "You don't have to, I know," he said. "But I want to." She watched him for a moment, then nodded toward the back. "Come on, then." "The key's in the office." He followed her through a narrow hallway, past a door with a hand-painted sign that reads "Staff Only." Inside, the office was cluttered boxes of old invoices, a flickering desk lamp, a corkboard pinned with photos and notes. It smelled faintly of lavender and paper. Vera rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a ring of keys. "You're not going to tell me what you really do, are you?" Darian leaned against the doorframe. "Why do you think I'm hiding something?" "Because you've got the posture of someone used to being listened to." He tilted his head. "That's pretty specific." "It's true," she said. "You stand like someone who doesn't get interrupted." He smiled. "I run a company." "What kind?" He hesitated. "Software." She narrowed her eyes. "Like apps, like infrastructure." "That sounds vague." "It is." She tossed him a set of keys. "You're lucky I like mysteries." He caught them easily. "What makes you think I'm a mystery?" "Because I've known you for all of 10 minutes, and you've already walked 40 blocks, borrowed a book you'll probably never read, and offered to help close a store you've never shopped in." "I might surprise you." "I hope so," she said, brushing past him. They locked the front door together, Vera twisting the key before tugging the metal grate halfway down. "You hungry?" she asked, starving. "There's a diner around the corner, not fancy, but their grilled cheese will ruin you for all other grilled cheese." Darian looked down at his watch. "Lead the way." She glanced at the silver timepiece. Vintage, my father's, he said, adjusting the strap. It's the only thing of his I kept. She didn't ask more and he didn't offer. Instead, they walked in silence, the kind that didn't feel awkward. The city was quieter, here no honking taxis, no flashing marquees. Just the soft hum of neon and the occasional bark of a dog down the block. Inside the diner, the booths were cracked vinyl, the menus laminated and sticky at the edges. Vera waved at the waitress, who brought 2 coffees without asking. "She knows your order," Darian asked. "She knows my face," Vera said. "I come here when I need to think. What about tonight? Tonight I wanted to see if you'd actually show up." "And now that I have," she didn't answer right away. Instead, she dipped her spoon into her coffee and stirred. "Now I'm wondering why you did." He leaned forward slightly. "Because you didn't look at me like everyone else does." She paused, her spoon clinking against the cup. "And how does everyone else look at you? Like I belong to them. And me, you looked at me like I was just a guy on a sidewalk." Vera folded her hands on the table. "Maybe that's all you are. Maybe," he said, eyes steady, "or maybe I'm more." The waitress dropped off their plates grilled cheese for both, fries still sizzling. Vera picked up half of her sandwich. "So what happens now? I eat this sandwich," he said, taking a bite. "And then I walk you home again." She didn't argue, and when they stepped back onto the sidewalk, the city didn't feel quite so loud. The following week unfolded in quiet, deliberate steps. It wasn't a typical routine for Darian, not when his days were usually dictated by back-to-back meetings, shifting boardroom alliances, and the constant hum of his phone. But Vera had become a gravitational pull, steady and inexplicably centering. He started showing up just before closing. No fanfare, no entourage. Sometimes he brought pastries from a bakery in Harlem that she'd once mentioned liking. Sometimes he just brought himself. And slowly, the rhythm between them began to change with each night. One evening, as he arrived just in time to help her turn the sign to closed, she met him at the door with her arms crossed. "I have a rule," she said, her tone playfully stern. Darian raised a brow. "Am I already breaking it?" "No showing up without warning if you're going to make me cancel plans." His gaze narrowed slightly. "You had plans. I was going to repaint the poetry shelf." "That sounds thrilling." "It is," she replied. "Especially when you're using paint that expired 2 years ago." He laughed, a low, easy sound. "Then I guess I came at the right time." "You came at the exact time I told myself I wouldn't let you distract me again." He stepped inside, letting the door fall shut behind him. "Yet here I am." She moved toward the back of the store, grabbing a small can of paint and a brush. "If you're staying, you're helping." "I wasn't aware this was a labor for fries arrangement." "It's not. You don't get fries until you do at least 2 coats." He knelt beside her without argument. "Fine, but if I ruin this, I'm blaming your expired paint." They worked in companionable silence, the only sound the scratch of brushes against old wood. After a while, Vera leaned back on her heels and studied his brushwork. "You're meticulous," she noted. "Occupational hazard. You still haven't told me why your company's name popped up on a news ticker yesterday." Darian didn't look up. "You Googled me?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Vera dipped her brush into the paint again. "I didn't expect to find your face next to a headline about a multi-million-dollar merger." "I didn't expect you to care." "I don't," she said quickly. Then, softer, "I just didn't think I was having grilled cheese with someone who's probably been to Davos." He set his brush down carefully. "Does that change something?" She wiped a streak of paint off her wrist. "It makes me wonder what else you're not telling me." Darian leaned against the base of the shelf, his knees drawn up. "I didn't hide anything." "You never asked if I was rich." "I figured it out when you paid for coffee with a titanium card and didn't blink at the total." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want that to be what you saw first." "I didn't," she said quietly. "I saw someone who looked like he hadn't had a real conversation in weeks." He turned to face her, his expression more open than she'd seen it. "That's exactly what I was." They sat there for a moment, the air between them heavy with unspoken things. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "I don't care about the money. I care that you don't know if you're visiting or staying." Darian drew in a breath. "I haven't stayed anywhere in a long time." Well, you'd better decide soon, Vera said, standing. Because I don't have time to get attached to someone who vanishes the second their phone rings. He stood too, brushing dust from his pants. I haven't answered a work call in 3 days. That's not the same as staying. His jaw tensed slightly. What would staying look like? Vera didn't answer right away. She walked to the counter and pulled out a battered ledger, flipping through pages until she found what she wanted. I need to renew the lease next month, she said. If I can't, the store's gone. My sister's already moved upstate. It's just me now, he crossed the room slowly. Why didn't you tell me? She looked up. Because I didn't want you to offer to fix it. I wouldn't, he said. Unless you asked. Even if I did, I don't want this place to be something you buy to impress me. That's not why I do it. Then why? Because I've never seen someone fight this hard to keep something so small and beautiful alive. Vera closed the ledger. It's not beautiful. Half the wiring's shot, the plumbing's ancient. It's yours, he said simply. And that makes it worth saving. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment her walls dropped just enough to let something warm into her eyes. You're going to ruin my ability to tolerate anyone else, she said. I'll take that risk. She stepped around the counter and stopped in front of him. You're not here as a tourist, are you? No, he said. I'm here because I want to be. Her fingers brushed his, tentative but not uncertain. Just then, the bell over the door rang. A man stepped in, older, with a weathered coat and a hesitant smile. Sorry, he said, glancing around. Didn't realize you were closed. Vera pulled her hand back. It's all right, Mr. Alcott. Did you need something? I left my reading glasses here yesterday. Thought I'd check. She reached beneath the counter and handed them over. Right where you left them. He gave Darian a curious glance before nodding his thanks and slipping back out into the night. Darian turned to her. Customers like that don't show up in stock portfolios. No, she said softly. They don't. He stepped closer again. Let me take you somewhere tomorrow. She narrowed her eyes just slightly. Where? You'll see, but it's not a press event, no cameras. Just you and me. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but if it involves a helicopter, no helicopters, he said with a faint grin. Just trust. She gave him a long, measured look. All right, Darian, one night. He leaned in, just enough for her to feel the change in the air between them. That's all I need. Vera stood outside the bookstore, arms folded against the early evening chill. She watched Darian approach from across the street, his coat open, hair tousled from the wind, holding a paper cup in each hand. He offered one to her without a word. She took it, cautious curiosity flickering behind her eyes. Chamomile, he said. You mentioned it once, something about it being the only thing that helps you think. She raised the cup slightly in mock salute. You listen better than most. I try harder than most. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a sip and glanced sideways at him. So where are we going? He nodded toward the street. Not far. But you'll need to trust me. I agreed to this date, not to blindfolds or mystery vans. No blindfolds, he said. Just something I want you to see. She followed him without more questions, keeping pace beside him as they turned down a quiet side street. It wasn't until they reached the end of the block that she slowed, her brow knit in cautious disbelief. You brought me to a gallery. He pushed open the glass door. Just come in. The space inside was quiet, hushed under high ceilings and soft track lighting. Paintings and photographs lined the walls, some abstract, others sharp and hauntingly detailed. But what made her stop in her tracks was the far wall, her journal, not the actual one, but pages that had been lifted, copied somehow, and turned into a series of framed pieces. Her words, her handwriting, blown up in elegant grayscale prints, each one paired with a photograph. They weren't famous shots, not glossy or posed. They were candid, the bookstore at dusk, a crumpled paper bag of fries, the flicker of neon in a rain-slicked window. Vera turned slowly. What is this? Darian kept his voice low. I asked your sister. She sent me scans from some of the journals you left at her place. I didn't read everything, just enough. Her jaw tensed. You had no right. I know, he said, but I didn't do it to expose anything. I did it to show you the way I see you. She gave a small, stunned laugh. Through a gallery exhibit. You give so much of yourself, Vera, to the store, to everyone, But you never let anyone see the whole picture. These pieces, they're fragments, honest ones, not perfect. But real. She stared at the closest print, a scrawl of half-finished verse paired with a photo of her sitting alone by the poetry shelf, her face lit by a desk lamp she hadn't realized was even on. You took these photos, he nodded, over the past few weeks. I asked the guy across the street to let me use his second-floor window. I didn't want to get in your way. Vera stepped closer to the wall, her fingertips hovering just near the glass. I've never seen myself like this, she said quietly. He moved beside her. I have. From the beginning, she turned to him, something raw and open in her expression. Why are you doing this? Because I know you think I live in a world where everything is disposable, parties, people, promises, but this, none of it's disposable to me. Her voice was low. I was terrified you'd be another beautiful disaster, someone I'd let in just long enough to watch them leave. Darian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a narrow envelope. Then maybe this will terrify you even more. She took it with hesitation, opening it slowly. Inside was a notarized document, a lease transfer. The name of the bookstore, her name, and a new landlord, Darian Zayne. Her eyes snapped to his. You bought the building. I bought the block, he said, under an LLC. No one will ever know it was me unless you tell them. Why would you do that? Because the store should be yours, without deadlines, without fear, and because I didn't want you to think I was trying to save you. I just wanted to give you space to grow. Tears welled despite her effort to stop them. You didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't want anything in return, he said, except maybe the chance to stay in your life. In whatever way you'll let me. She folded the paper carefully, her hands trembling slightly. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, he said, and I wouldn't change a single thing about you. She stepped closer, her breath catching. Not even the fact that I eat fries for dinner more often than I should, especially that. A slow smile tugged at her lips. You're impossible. And you're infuriating. She tilted her chin up. That usually scares people away. He didn't hesitate. Then let me be the one who stays. There, under the soft light of her own words, she kissed him. It was not a kiss of fireworks or crashing waves. It was quieter, steady. The kind of kiss that makes you forget the room you're in, that silences everything except the certainty that this person, this moment is exactly where you are meant to be. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? She whispered. He glanced around the gallery. We go back to the store, you alphabetize poetry, I alphabetize my chaos, and we figure out how to build something that lasts. I don't want this to be a fantasy, she said, voice barely audible. It's not, he promised. It's just the start of something real. They left together, hand in hand, stepping back into the city that no longer felt so loud. Weeks later, the bookstore buzzed with life. The poetry shelf gleamed with a fresh coat of paint. A small espresso bar hummed in the back corner, courtesy of a quiet renovation Darian funded under her name. Customers came and went, but Vera never missed the way he lingered, always last to leave, always first to show up. And sometimes, near closing time, they sat on those front steps again, just her and him. French fries between them, no cameras, no noise. Only the quiet certainty of a love neither of them had seen coming. And this time he didn't run from it. Vera adjusted the stack of new titles on the front display table, noting the slow but steady stream of customers browsing the aisles. The bookstore had become busier in the last month, not crowded, never chaotic but alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Word had spread about the tiny independent shop that curated handwritten poetry recommendations and served espresso in mismatched ceramic cups. But what made her smile most wasn't the attention, it was the fact that she wasn't doing it alone. Move the Steinbeck up, Darian said from behind her, holding a small ladder in one hand and a battered copy of East of Eden in the other. It's been selling like crazy. She looked over her shoulder. That's because you recommended it to everyone who asked for a romance. It is a romance, he said, climbing 2 steps up, just not the kind with a happy ending. She grabbed the book from him. Then maybe they should try something that doesn't end in emotional ruin. You're starting to sound like a publisher. I'm starting to sound like someone who doesn't want customers crying in aisle 3. He leaned down, brushing a kiss to the crown of her head before stepping off the ladder. I'll defer to your expertise, Miss Hart. She rolled her eyes, but the corners of her mouth gave her away. You're awfully agreeable today. I had 3 hours of sleep, and your barista gave me double espresso without asking. I'm basically vibrating. You could go home, you know. No one's making you alphabetize the nonfiction section. He leaned against the nearest shelf. I'd rather be here, you know that. She didn't argue. Not anymore. His presence in the store had become as familiar as the sound of the bell above the door or the scent of old paper and cinnamon scones. He'd started showing up every day not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. And now, after weeks of pretending he was just helping, the truth was clear to both of them. He wasn't leaving. Vera walked toward the back room to grab another stack of inventory slips when she paused halfway through the doorway. I forgot to tell you, she said, turning around. A woman came in this morning asking about you. Darian's brow lifted. What kind of woman? Sharp suit, expensive boots, the kind of person who doesn't browse. She said she was from your company. He pushed off the shelf. What did she want? She said they were finalizing your exit paperwork. That's all. I told her to come back when you were in. His expression was unreadable for a beat, then softened. They wanted me to reconsider. A few board members floated a counteroffer. Vera crossed her arms, and I told them no. She tilted her head. Just like that. I've spent half my life building something that never made me feel anything close to what this place makes me feel in a single afternoon. Why would I go back to that? She didn't smile. Not yet. You're really done. I gave them my final answer last week. I just didn't want to make a thing of it. She walked toward him slowly. You gave up everything you built. No, Vera, he said, his voice steady. I let go of something that was holding me back. This is the first thing I've built that actually matters. There was no grand romantic gesture this time, no gallery walls or notarized documents, just the quiet certainty in his voice and the way he looked at her like she was already home. She slid her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his chest. You know, I was terrified you'd get bored. Are you kidding? He murmured, pressing his lips to her hair. You're the most unpredictable thing in my life. You rearranged the philosophy section yesterday and told me it was an emotional necessity. It was disorganized. It was anarchy. She smiled into his shirt. You stayed anyway. I always will. Later that evening, after the last customer had left and the espresso machine had been cleaned for the night, Vera stepped out onto the sidewalk to lock the door. Darian followed, slipping his jacket over her shoulders before she could protest. You're always cold, he said. Accept it. She didn't fight him. She leaned against the doorframe as he pulled the grate down and turned the key in the lock. I was thinking, she said, watching the streetlights blink on. Maybe we should host readings again, like we used to. Local writers, musicians, make it feel like a community hub. He nodded thoughtfully. We could clear out the front tables, add some floor cushions, get a speaker system that doesn't sound like it's underwater. And I want to do a scholarship fund. For kids who want to write but can't afford workshops or supplies. I'll match whatever you raise. She glanced at him. You always do that. Offer to help before I even ask. That's because I believe in you more than you do. She didn't have a response for that, not one that wouldn't turn her into a puddle of feelings, so she just reached for his hand and held it. 2 months later, the first reading night brought in more people than they had chairs. Vera stood behind the counter, watching a high school senior nervously recite a poem about her grandmother's garden while Darian passed out hot cider to guests. The place felt alive laughter, applause, warmth, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world was exactly as it should be. When the night wound down and the last group trickled out, Vera turned off the lights and looked at him across the now quiet store. You didn't know this place 2 months ago, she said softly. I didn't know a lot of things 2 months ago. She walked to him, arms wrapping around his neck. You happy? He kissed her. Completely. And in that moment, with the hum of the fridge in the background and the echo of poetry still clinging to the walls, they both knew they'd found something rare. Something that didn't need fixing or proving, something that was real. A year later, they were married in the bookstore on a rainy spring evening. The ceremony was small, filled with the smell of old pages and fresh flowers. Vera wore a dress that looked like it belonged in a dream. Darian wore a suit that didn't try too hard. They exchanged vows between the poetry shelf and the memoir section, with customers turned friends cheering from the aisles. Afterward, they danced under string lights taped along the ceiling, the music low, the joy high. And when the last song ended and the cake had vanished, they curled up together on the old reading couch in the back corner, shoes off, champagne glasses half full. "I never thought I'd fall in love with someone who ruins my alphabetization system every week," she said, eyes bright. "And I never thought I'd fall in love with someone who could out-stubborn a boardroom full of billionaires." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We're a mess, we're perfect, and they were together, always.